Hi, everybody. I'm Mike. This is a bunch of Guns and Gear reviews, and you are listening to the Right Other People single shot, where it's just you, me, and whatever topic is trip my trigger today. So uncover your keyboard, fire up your finger, and come join the conversation.
Well, it would have been all right if it was the right intro music. This isn't a single shot. This is, in fact, the full meal deal, hour-long show. Glad to see you guys here tonight. Thanks for stopping in. Don't have a whole lot of people out in the chat just yet, but let's go through the panel. We got someone new. We got Mike from MW Tactical here with us. Thanks for stopping by, sir. Tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are, what you do, etc. Unmute, Mike.
I'm sorry about that.
There you go.
I'm
No
sorry.
problem.
Yeah, I'm just over here just talking away. All right, but first of all, what I said was thanks for having me on. I do appreciate the invite. And number two, I'm out of Columbia, South Carolina. And if you go ahead and you click right there, m-wtactical.com, you can read up on me a little bit and some of the stuff that I have going on. Currently, what I'm doing is I get enjoyment out of teaching people how to shoot and helping them perfect their marksmanship game. At the same time, I'm doing a series of projects that hopefully we'll get around to talking about later on, some little community work to uplift the community and bring everybody together through the acts of the 2A community.
All right. Well, thanks for coming by. I'm really glad to have you tonight. Roll call. How you doing, brother?
What's going on, man? Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. Ryan, ZRS Tactical. How you doing, sir? Or ZRS Outdoors, my bad.
Hey, I'll take it. A little bit of tactical in here. Don't hurt anybody. Thanks for having me, man.
Looks like we got out on the YouTube side just a couple people right now. John Brown, Midnight Range. Good to see you guys. Patriot is out there on the gun channel side. Good to see you, sir. Got a lot to talk about tonight and a 55 minutes to get it done in. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing I want to talk about is, as predicted by many people, not just myself, one of the upshoots of the newsroom shooting in Maryland is that, since, of course, the shooter there did not use an AR, did not use, any uber tactical, evil, scary looking guns. He, in fact, used a shotgun, thus proving that Maryland's assault weapons bans and their strict handgun regulations and whatnot are pretty much useless in preventing this kind of thing. The cry is that their laws don't go far enough. This is a piece from the Baltimore Sun by Scott Dance. Maryland's strict gun laws could not prevent Capitol Gazette shootings, spurring talk of changes. Although Maryland has some of the most restrictive gun laws in the country, none could have prevented the massacre of 5 people in the Capitol newsroom Thursday, policymakers said. The weapon used in the attack has been described by police as a pump-action shotgun. While long guns like shotguns and rifles are less tightly regulated than handguns, a purchaser nonetheless must undergo a background check to buy one from a dealer, as Jared W. Ramos did. But Ramos was never convicted of a crime serious enough to bar such a purchase. He pleaded guilty in 2011 to harassing a woman he had known in high school, but harassment isn't among the misdemeanors that prohibit gun ownership under state or federal law. Maryland has a new law, which becomes effective in October, that will allow judges to seize guns from a person deemed a danger to themselves or others. But the group of people who can petition for such an order is narrow. Besides police and medical professionals, it includes only spouses, dating partners, and close relatives. So even had the law been in effect and had there been a threat, neither Capitol staff nor the woman he once harassed would have been able to file a red flag petition about the alleged shooter, experts said. The Capitol shooting has already caused some lawmakers to begin talking about ways to tighten gun laws as others discuss how best to strengthen mental health services, anything to enact protections to deter another mass shooting. If someone is intent on doing something like the tragedy that occurred, maybe we can't prevent it, said Delegate Derek E. Davis, a Prince George's County Democrat. But that doesn't mean we don't keep trying. At a Saturday night rally in Baltimore for Democratic gubernatorial candidate Ben Jealous, U.S. Senator Ben Cardin said the Annapolis shooting was a reminder of why Congress also needs to revisit the issue of more restrictive gun laws. Our hearts are heavy about what happened in Annapolis, Cardin said. We need to pass sensible gun safety legislation. Gun rights advocates say there is no law that could have prevented the targeted rampage on the Annapolis newsroom, but the existing criminal laws, if followed, can effectively prevent dangerous individuals from buying weapons. Mark Pennock, president of Maryland Shall Issue, blamed prosecutors for failing to use existing criminal laws to effectively punish Ramos for his past actions and keep him from buying a firearm. Police say Ramos's anger with the Capitol stemmed from a July 2011 article detailing his harassment of the woman he knew in high school. Ramos pleaded guilty to harassing her, received a 90-day suspended sentence with 18 months probation, and was required to receive psychological treatment. Had he been convicted of stalking, considered a more serious misdemeanor than harassment, Ramos could have been prevented from buying the shotgun he purchased last year, Pennock said. The authorities allowed the proven harasser to get by, he said. You don't need another law for that. And Arundel County State's Attorney Wes Adams, who was not in office at the time of Ramos's harassment conviction, declined to comment. Frank Weathersby, who held the office at the time, died in 2015. Ramos, 38, has been charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder. He's accused of killing 5 Capitol employees. Editor and columnist Rod Hyacin, I'm sorry if I butchered that, 59. Reporter Wendy Winters, 65. Editorial page editor Gerald Fishman, 61. Editor and sports writer John McNamara, 56. And sales assistant Rebecca Smith, 34. 2 other staff members, Rachel Pasella and Janelle Cooley, were injured during the attack. They have been released from the hospital. Police encountered the Laurel man as early as 2010 when the woman told police when the woman told officers Ramos's message to her had turned vulgar, court documents say. A judge approved a restraining order in 2011 and Ramos pleaded guilty. The conviction was later expunged. Court records show Ramos's aggression did not stop. The same woman received 2 more restraining orders against him in 2012 and 2013. He was also sending aggressive messages to staff at the Capitol. The newspaper met with county police in 2013 to discuss Ramos, a police report shows. The report said his messages mentioned phrases like murderous rampage, journalist hell, and open season. The officer concluded he did not believe Mr. Ramos was a threat to the employees of the employees for the Capitol. Wow, what more do you need, guy? As recently as 2014, Ramos wrote in a court filing that he had sworn a legal oath to kill Eric Hartley, the Capitol columnist who had written about his harassment case. None of that prevented a licensed firearms dealer from selling Ramos a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun in 2017. Shotguns and rifles are not on a list of regulated firearms under state law, but buying one does require a person to pass a federal background check. Buyers are disqualified if they're found to be drug abusers, fugitives, or convicted domestic abusers, for example. Anyone convicted of federal crimes punishable by at least a year in prison are also barred from buying firearms. Only active protective orders prevent a federally regulated firearms purchase. The most recent order against Ramos expired in March 2014, court records show. Convictions for state crimes also disqualify people under the federal background check system, but only for offenses punishable by at least 2 years in prison. A first offense of harassment carries a maximum penalty of up to 90 days, the punishment Ramos received. But stalking, a similar and often simultaneous charge, warrants up to a 5-year sentence. While a judge could not have predicted an outburst of violence 7 years in the future, in hindsight, it suggests that state laws may not be adequately preventing dangerous people from obtaining guns, said Senator Robert A. Zirkin, a Baltimore County Democrat. He said he and Senate colleagues have been discussing how to prevent another tragedy like the Capitol shooting. That's the type of an individual that you at least want to have the judge have some discretion on taking away gun rights, Zirkin said. The General Assembly passed a red flag law this year to do just that. As of October, Maryland will be one of 11 states that authorize extreme risk protection orders, giving judges authority to strip firearms from individuals shown to be a threat to themselves or others, even if they're not accused or convicted criminals. 6 of those state laws were signed in the wake of the shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida in February. The laws vary by state. In Maryland, only blood relatives, spouses, dating partners, co-parents, or the legal guardians can file red flag petitions. Lawmakers narrowed that privilege based on concerns that the petitions could be filed vindictively. Zirkin questioned why the opportunity was not extended to any person who has been granted a protective order or the target of a convicted stalker. That seems like a modification we will look at, he said. That seems like a modification that should be made. Maryland is routinely ranked among states with the toughest laws regulating gun sales and ownership. Major gun legislation has included prohibiting the sale of some assault weapons and granting law enforcement discretion over denying applications to wear or carry handguns. Maryland also requires that a background check be conducted before the sale of all regulated firearms, mostly handguns, even in private sales. Because shotguns and rifles aren't regulated under that state law, a background check isn't conducted when they're sold privately. Next year, lawmakers could revisit whether the sale of long guns should receive that scrutiny, Davis said. Past attempts to add shotguns and rifles to the list of regulated firearms in Maryland have failed, largely out of concerns that they are used commonly by hunters and farmers, but rarely in crimes. Davis has proposed such bills in the past and said that he will explore similar legislation before the next year's General Assembly session. Others say they will instead continue to look at mental health issues. Republican Senator J.B. Jennings, the Senate Minority Leader, said mental health reforms are more important than gun laws. This guy was sick and he needed help, Jennings said. Somebody could have called or the courts should have intervened and put this guy away. So there you have it, folks. The typical response. Instead of enforcing existing laws and making sure that people like this don't fall through the cracks and don't receive the proper charges and the proper interventions by the court, let's just go ahead and make more laws because, you know, passing a law automatically cures the problem, doesn't it? What do you guys think?
I think one of the first failures in the whole thing, that how it happened, is that there was not an actual follow-up on the threats that were being made to prevent somebody from buying a firearm. If there was actual a follow-up call, or if there was actual follow-up on the call that was made on the guy who was making all these threats and everything, there may have been some kind of barrier between him and a firearm.
Exactly. It's yet again a case of law enforcement not following up on something that they should be following up on. You know, it's not as egregious as what happened in the case of the Parkland shooter, where he had, 36, 37, 38 interactions with law enforcement where they did nothing. This fellow at least had something, but unfortunately he continued to be a problem and they did nothing about it, which resulted in these deaths.
Yeah, I think an open threat should be enough to follow up on a call that was made. If there was a call that was made, when you read that off, you said there was an officer that said that he didn't think that he was capable, or that he didn't think that he was a threat. So does that mean that there was an actual call made, or does that mean that the officer was just like, knew he was a kind of a weird guy and didn't do anything? No.
Well, it sounds to me like there was an actual call made where this was reported and they did nothing. Yeah. Newspaper met with county police in 2013 to discuss Ramos. A police report shows. So yeah, there was the newspaper called the police and filed a report and reported that he sent messages to them that said things like murderous rampage, journalist hell, and open season. But the officer they talked to said, I don't think it's a threat to the employees, even though he's talking about open season on them going on a murderous rampage and sending them to journalist hell. I mean, what more does the guy need? Freaking severed heads hanging from his belt?
Yeah, I think that was a slight ball drop on the law enforcement's part there, when somebody makes a call and a claim that somebody could be potentially dangerous and you don't follow up on that call, or you deem the person to be not a threat, even though they're openly stating the threat. And I don't know where the threat was actually made. Was it made verbally, or was it like social media, or?
From what I gather, it's either text messages or social media or something like that. You know,
a text message is as good as open threat. If you threaten to physically harm somebody, that's a good enough reason to have the police show up at your door.
Absolutely. So I don't understand why, you know, this fellow was deemed not to be a threat when he clearly was. And had they acted on it and prosecuted, and, you know, there's a good chance that there would not have been any, he wouldn't have been able to buy that shotgun, and that would have been that. So I don't.
that's the responsibility of that police officer who totally screwed the pooch on that one. And also that falls on that newspaper. Now, if that newspaper would have filed an injunction on that guy, file that restraining order against him as he's making these threats, and just went around that police officer, I bet you that would show up on a 4473 if they would file a restraining order against him. Because in the state of Indiana, if you have a restraining order, you ain't buying a gun. You ain't buying a gun like that, and that's their responsibility. Which, you know, I've seen in some people's conversations that they knew this guy was going to be a problem, and they never did anything about it. So now I'm going,
they had multiple restraining orders against him. It's just that there currently wasn't one active, and that was the problem.
Can we step back 2 paces? And
Sure.
Everything everybody's saying is correct. And yeah, the problem is the guy slipped through the cracks. We can actually say he had a problem. He made the threats. Yeah, we all know that. That's all factual. But what the problem really comes down to is the system with the laws are not talking with each other. And that's how he was able to slip through the cracks. Because if everybody was doing what they were supposed to do on the government side, I guess we can label it as that. If A and B and C was all connected, he would have never been able to walk in and get a gun and go through with everything he did.
I could agree with that. I think that's I've talked about this before with it started with the guy in Texas, when he had his issues in the Air Force, and then the Air Force didn't report to the NICS system the issues that he had that would have disqualified him, all through with the FBI and the local law enforcement's bungling of the situation in Parkland. And then, up to this, it's about communication within the branches of government not really happening as they should. And I can agree with you on that. I don't know, I wish I had the solution to that problem, government being a maze to navigate all on its own. If I had that solution, man, I'd be filthy rich.
Yeah. Well, what the problem really is, for instance, look at all the movies and cop shows that go on. So when you have like local police and the FBI, they start battling each other about who is supposed to take the lead on the crime.
Yeah.
It's the same way when you look at, okay, if we implement something that bounces off of these 3 channels, who's going to be in charge? Right. And part of it is some people don't want to be in charge, but then the real fight could be, I'm fighting for, dominance, and the other person's fighting for dominance, so they can't come to an agreement to make headway.
I think in this situation, if whoever made that call, that local law enforcement would have actually done their job and actually investigated or actually pursued the threat that he was making. I think if there's an open threat, there's an open door to pursue that threat. And I think if that officer in charge would have actually pursued that, that's the noise that would have been made to start the chain to eliminate this guy from being able to, quote unquote, purchase a firearm.
Yep. I think that one thing we can all agree on in this is that the solution isn't to tighten already strict and repressive gun laws, which, it's just the same page out of the playbook they always use whenever anything happens. We use this tragedy as an excuse to call for tighter restrictions. Let's use the tragedy as an excuse to call for tighter restrictions. They do it before the crime scene's even cleared, and they do it every time. And it's a damn shame.
If that, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna move on.
Okay.
Now that we have some more people in here, I want to go ahead and go through the chat. Just say hello, John Brown, Midnight Range, Russ Carr, Ozark Yeoman, Philo, Grim 90, Thermo Redneck, Russ Carr, the Gun Snob. I want to say hello to all you guys. Thanks for stopping in and watching. I really appreciate it. Over on the gun channel side, we got Patriot and Dead Horse. Thanks for coming by and watching, guys. I really appreciate it. With that, let's go ahead and move on just a little bit more. We got about a half hour left to cover some ground here. So next thing I want to talk about, from the land of fruits and nuts. I wish Matt from 50 Caliber Karma was here with us tonight. Maybe he would have something to say about this since he lives in California. Any of you out in the chat who happen to live in California, please feel free to chime in. California Supreme Court rules that law requiring the impossible is constitutional. It's a piece from Ammo Land by Dean Weingarten. Published on July 2nd, 2018. Arizona. In 2007, California passed a law. He must be in Arizona. In 2007, California passed a law requiring all new semi-automatic handgun models to have dual stamp microstamping incorporated into their design. Because of legal challenges, the law did not go into effect until 2013. In 2013, California AG Kamala Harris insisted on enforcing the law. No new handgun models have been added to the California handgun roster since that time. Manufacturers have stated that dual microstamping, as required by the California law, is technologically and commercially impossible. The state appeals court ruling was appealed to the California Supreme Court on the grounds that the law cannot require an impossibility. On June 28, 2018, the California Supreme Court ruled that state legislature can require impossible things if that was the legislature's intent. From the San Francisco Chronicle.com, gun manufacturers must do their best to comply with a California law requiring new models of semi-automatic handguns to imprint their bullets with identifying microstamps so police can trace them, the state Supreme Court ruled Thursday, rejecting the company's arguments that the law should be overturned because compliance is technologically impossible. A gun control advocate said that the ruling preserves safety regulations that encourage industries to develop new technologies. A gun organization's lawyer said the state is headed for a slow-motion handgun ban. The gun law, passed in 2007, is supported by police organizations that say the stamps would help officers to determine the source of bullets found at crime scenes. It requires that new brands of semi-automatic pistols introduced for retail sale in California carry markings in 2 places that would imprint the gun's model and serial number on each cartridge as it is fired. A federal legal challenge to the law on Second Amendment grounds was filed in June of 2013. The district court upheld the law. An appeal was filed in the Ninth Circuit. The oral arguments were heard on March 16, 2017, over a year ago, by a 3-judge panel. The Ninth Circuit still has not ruled over a year later. If the 3-judge panel in the Ninth Circuit rules for the Second Amendment, I expect the judge on the Ninth will demand a vote for an en banc ruling by the entire Ninth Circuit. That has been the pattern for recent Second Amendment cases in the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit en banc has been ideologically hostile to the Second Amendment. A new Supreme Court justice appointed by President Donald Trump to replace retiring Justice Kennedy should be on the Supreme Court by the time the court would be called to hear an appeal from the Ninth Circuit on this case. That might, or might not, make the difference in whether or not the Supreme Court would decide to hear an appeal of the case. The Supreme Court has been able to pick and choose what cases it will hear since 1891. In 1891, the legislature gave the power to refuse cases to the Supreme Court in order to reduce the court's workload. Instead of being heard by the Supreme Court, most cases are heard by the appellate courts. The Ninth Circuit has become the circuit with the highest percentage of decisions overturned by the Supreme Court. So there you go. In California, it is quite all right to require the impossible. Which the California legislature knew it was impossible, both from a technological and practical and commercial standpoint. And that's why they did it, in my opinion. It's nothing but slow motion gun control. It's okay. It's the same thing that they did with the Hughes Amendment in the 80s to require that no more civilian machine guns could be manufactured. That eventually the existing pool would just dry up and go away, and we don't have to worry about it.
Let's look at this from the let's take the logistical standpoint of this. That let's eliminate that and say that you were able to stamp every bullet that got fired from every gun and say that it's feasibly possible. Fine, I have a pistol that I own that shoots, and every time I shoot it, it has my serial number off the firearm that I shot it from. Let's say I sell that gun. Let's say that somebody else winds up with it, and then somebody else winds up with it. Or let's just say the same kind of gun gets stolen or bought by somebody else and gets sold to somebody else. Let's say that gun is used in a crime. Either way, you only have that serial number of the first person that purchased it, or the first person that owned it, or the second person that owned it. It doesn't matter who's actually using it in a crime. Now you get to trace your papers back and say, well, Joe Blow owns it. Let's go back to him. He says, I sold it. Is Joe Blow actually going to be the guy that actually uses that gun in that crime? Like they're chasing street crime. They're chasing guns used in street crime to say, if we had a serial number for this bullet, which let's look at the fingerprint of the rifling that bullets have on them when they get fired from a...
Do they require private transactions to be registered in California?
I'm not sure about that, but in all reality is that if a gun is used in a crime, it don't matter.
Yeah.
Someone's still dead, and you can either trace it back to the guy that owned it before or trace it back to somebody who just used it. You still have to find that person. You still have to find who owned that gun and prove that they shot that gun.
Yep.
It don't matter if you have a serial number on it or not. If that person didn't shoot that gun or have a good case that they didn't shoot it, what good is a serial number on a bullet's going to do?
Well, and I think they know this, and I think they don't care. I think that any purported crime-solving benefits are just, it's smoke and mirrors. It's an outright lie. I think, frankly, that the entire purpose of the law was slow-motion gun control. It's to ban and make sure that no new semi-automatic handgun models can come into the state. That's exactly what I think.
Yeah, and which it's going to cost more to have that gun to be able to stamp that bullet, which means it's a backdoor gun control, which means it's going to cost more for somebody to buy a gun.
Yep.
That's all.
That's all it is.
You're really not going to gain too much more ground as far as chasing that gun to the actual person who fired the bullet.
Nope. And they don't care. And that's it. Midnight Range says, but budget, if it saves just one, who cares if it dooms 100? Yeah, I know, right? Because it just depends on who that one and who that 100 is. That's all they give a damn about. Let's see. Next up in Cali, only guns that can be test fired by an actual unicorn are legal. Sorry if it's not possible. Yeah. Thermo Redneck says, the reason I will never live in a liberal state. I hear you. But there are some people that they can't move. You know, their lives, their families, their careers, their everything is tied up with where they're at, and they can't leave. So it's rough. I feel for you guys that are trapped behind enemy lines.
That is a sad case, though, when you look at it overall. To me, what it just sounds like, yeah, they're targeting the gang activity that's going on out there. Crimes, we just narrow it down to crimes. But it also looks like a quicker way of putting people in jail, incarcerating them, and don't care if it's legal or the wrong person.
Yeah,
you know,
that's exactly it. Like you can chase that serial number from that bullet that got fired that's embedded in that person, and it could be Joe Blow that sold that gun a long time ago or got that gun stolen, and now all of a sudden he's caught up in this crime, which is the same sense whenever if a gun is used in a crime that somebody sold or whatever it may be, it's up to the court of law to find innocent or guilty. And if somebody is involved in that, stamping a bullet is really, you have rifling that is like a fingerprint. When a bullet gets fired, it's fingerprinted. I mean, it's the same groundwork that a detective has to use. I mean, I get it. They're trying to make it easier to trace the gun to the crime or the person to the crime. But if a bullet gets fired from a gun that has a serial number, it's only going to get traced back to the person who bought the gun. Like and it could be the wrong person.
Yeah, that's one of those literally a slippery slope. That's what that really comes down to right there. But it just baffles me to hear them say the courts can still prosecute on the ignorance of not knowing or something that can't be created.
Yeah.
That's like saying, okay, we're not going to use facts in this court case, but we just want to go off emotions.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't add up. That's really sad. That's really sad, though.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is. Speaking of states that live under their own reality, New Jersey gun ban exempts cops but makes veterans criminals. Piece from Ken Kukowski in Breitbart, July 2nd, 2018. New Jersey recently made 1 million of its citizens criminals by banning common firearm ammunition magazines without any grandfathering provision, but plaintiffs challenging the statute on Second Amendment grounds also argue that it violates equal protection because it exempts retired law enforcement but not retired military. A feature noticed just as America prepares to celebrate the 4th of July. The new gun ban makes it illegal for the part of the firearm that contains the ammunition rounds, which is called a magazine, to contain more than 10 rounds. Many common firearms are designed to carry more than 10, but possessing such devices is now a crime in the Garden State. When most states pass such laws, they contain grandfathering provisions that ban future sales. New Jersey's law instantly made all such owners criminals while giving them a short window to turn in their gun accessories before prosecutions could begin. The flagship gun rights organization in the state is the Association of New Jersey Rifle and Pistol Clubs, ANJRPC, which is the state affiliate of the National Rifle Association. ANJRPC's executive director, Scott Bach, also serves on the NRA's board of directors. ANJRPC vigorously opposed this law, challenging it for the violation of the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, taking property without just compensation in violation of the Fifth Amendment, and denying people in New Jersey the equal protection of the laws in violation of the Fourth Amendment Equal Protection Clause. Lawyers representing ANJRPC are from Cooper & Kirk, a highly respected appellate and Supreme Court law firm led by Chuck Cooper, the former head of the Department of Justice's Office of Legal Counsel, with the full backing and support of the NRA. Their filings this week focused on one provision of the law that could be seen as outrageous by voters. While retired police officers are exempt from the law, retired military personnel are not, and they become criminals if they do not turn in their arms. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy and legislators silenced objections from law enforcement by exempting retired police from the ban, said an ANJRPC press release on Monday. But they made a mistake in their pandering strategy that could prove fatal to the new law. They failed to also exempt military veterans from the 10-round limit. Their pandering blunder reveals a serious violation of equal protection under the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. An arbitrary privilege afforded to one group cannot be denied to others who are similarly situated. The statement continued. Retired police and military veterans both have civilian status, the same status as every one of New Jersey's 1 million gun owners. Exempting retired police over veterans and also over the entire civilian population itself violates equal protection. New Jersey lawmakers thought they were preempting a groundswell of law enforcement opposition to the magazine ban by exempting retired police, said Bach in his organization's statement. Instead, they created a vulnerability that threatens the very existence of the precious new law, and ANJRPC is making the most of that vulnerability. ANJRPC's lawyers have asked the federal court for a preliminary injunction to block the new statute while this lawsuit goes through the legal process. Military veterans, like the rest of the civilian population in New Jersey, have now been relegated to second-class status and placed at a significant disadvantage when it comes to defending their lives against criminals and gangs, who ironically will ignore the ban and be armed to the teeth, said Bach. The case is Association of New Jersey Rifle and Pistol Clubs versus Grewal, and then it cites what the number it is in the U.S. District Court. So there you go. Hopefully New Jersey stepped in it and they can use this. The NRA and its affiliate there in New Jersey can use this as a means by which to get rid of this bad law. You know, and I think they're right. I think that not just with retired military, but making a carve out for police only and not everybody else, that, you know, it's a case of some animals are more equal than others, and that's wrong. But then again, what do you expect from New Jersey?
Well, you know, New York has that same thing going on with the 10 magazine ban.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I went up to New York, this was back in 2014, 2015, while I was still in the military. they was saying, like, if you get pulled over and if an officer sees a magazine in the back seat of the car or in the vehicle, and if they look at it and play with it and realize it's more than 10, you can be arrested because, you know, that's the law now. You can't have magazines more than 10 rounds.
Yep.
But as soon as that law came out in New Jersey and they made a difference between police, military, and civilians, I'm pretty sure somebody did start digging in, like looking up some type of EEO complaint, because that is kind of unfair to do something like that.
Absolutely right.
That's
carves out a special class and sets them above everyone else, and that's not what this country's about.
That's complete discrimination right there. That's open discrimination, and that had better be like a ball drop on someone's part that was like, oh, whoops, you know. If not, that's a civil lawsuit, easy.
Well, and the article I read says something that's absolutely right. You know, this tactic of making a carve out for retired police and whatnot and other groups is generally done so that it can get rid of opposition to the bill by those groups, you know, by like the FOP or you know, other police unions or police, you know, the Chief of Police Association, et cetera, you know, it's done so that those people won't oppose the law. So, well, it doesn't affect me. Let's, you know, go ahead, whatever. It's kind of like, you know, FUDs when they're coming after the AR-15s, but they're leaving the shotguns alone. You know, it's kind of why it's done. It's sort of let's separate these guys out. That reduces our opposition, so we're more likely to get this done. But what it does in effect is sort of a de facto situation is it creates a class of people that has more privileges than the common run of citizenry. It, in effect, sets them above everybody else. And I do believe we fought a war about this back in the 1700s. I could be wrong.
So my question is that what if you are prior military and are retired police officer? Where do you lie? Where does the law lie?
Well, don't look at it from that standpoint. Look at it from the standpoint of if they're already classifying a certain group of people, depending on your previous job that you're retired from, right now, our law is going to be geared to you to be fair.
Yeah, I was totally making that as a joke, but I mean, because the obscenity of it is ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, what's, you know, if they can do that, if they can set aside carve outs and make this law not apply to retired police, then they could set aside a carve out and make a law not apply to retired plumbers or retired bricklayers or, you know, or left-handed people or redheads or you know, if they can do it with one group, then they can do it with any other group. And that's crap. All laws should apply to equally to everybody across the board. Anybody within the confines of the United States or its territories or protectorates should fall under the same law, period.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that's what the whole challenge on this on the equal protection angle is all about. And frankly, I think that's exactly the right way to take this. I think that any judge with some integrity would see it that way, but
I think Russ Carr
ideology to get ahead of them.
Russ Carr in the chat brought up a pretty good example. There is that police officers are still civilians.
Absolutely right.
Well, one way you can actually narrow this down is, for one, we're not in that area. We don't know exactly what goes on. We can sit here and say what's fair, what's not fair. But obviously, from what we heard, it does show that there is a level of inconsistency amongst government and the people. You know. So,
oh yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, everybody's supposed to be equal. If you haven't, you know, outside of the guys that have used, you know, felons, let's say, obviously. But as far as nobody that's committed a crime or is in no reason to be held against owning a firearm, should not be held against owning a firearm. To say that, you know, retired military or even prior military shouldn't own a firearm is just asinine.
Yep. Vanessa Kitty says special classes are government employees versus not. Carve outs for court personnel, cops, all sorts of Fed, all sorts of certain person at state and political levels. Yeah, and that's the problem. It in effect creates a ruling class, and that's not what our country's supposed to be about. We are all equal in this country, and that's how it should be. She says in Connecticut, it says in the law banning these mags that military or the state and national level, technically retired male are always at the beck and call of the federal government for the rest of their lives, just because they're retired male. Yeah, but it's part of it is that we have this crazy patchwork all across our country of gun laws that by crossing an imaginary line, what's legal here in Ohio isn't necessarily legal in Pennsylvania. What's legal in Pennsylvania isn't necessarily legal in West Virginia. What's legal in West Virginia isn't necessarily legal in Kentucky, and so on and so forth. And that's just I'm all for state rights, but I think when it comes to certain things, there should be a uniformity. And when it comes to constitutionally enumerated rights of the people, I think that should be uniform across the territory the Constitution is the governing document of.
Yeah, the only problem with it having to be uniformity is that if there is somebody that's going to enact the uniformity of it, it's going to have to be government, and then the moment the government steps in is going to be.
And that is the problem.
Yeah, you can't have uniformity without a higher power than the state stepping in, and then not going to crap like the downhill slope.
Well, and that historically that problem has been solved in our country by the Supreme Court, by SCOTUS, and which goes back to something I talked about last week. I think it was last week. Well, and I've talked about in prior weeks, is the absolutely critical nature of Supreme Court appointments. That's why this past presidential election, love him, hate him, voted for him, voted against him, whatever. To me, it is a divine blessing that we got Donald Trump instead of Hillary Clinton, because the way that the Supreme Court would have looked for the next 20, 30 years is drastically different depending upon which one of those two got elected. We'll find out on Monday, from everything I'm reading, who Trump is going to pick as his next nominee to replace Kennedy. And everything I'm reading, the short list looks pretty good. Although the one fellow that's favored, he may have a history of kind of being, we may be replacing one swing vote with another, which is kind of depressing. So we'll see. And speaking of laws being different depending upon where you're at, in Florida, it's a piece from AmmoLand. Florida Carry members assaulted by Miami Beach police. The board of directors of Florida Carry are appalled at the recent treatment of 6 of our members at the hands of officers of the Miami Beach Police Department on this says July 24th, but it's really happened on June 24th at approximately 10 a.m. Our members were peacefully fishing at South Point Park Pier while openly carrying firearms in accordance with 790.253H Florida statutes, as members of our organization have done at various locations throughout the state since 2010. The organization uses these gatherings to hand out literature regarding firearms laws in Florida and to demonstrate that a visible gun is not necessarily a threat when held by a law-abiding citizen. Apparently, the law enforcement officers themselves are the threat. Cell phone video of the incident shows the cops coming up to the Florida Carry people, guns drawn, pointed at them, being very confrontational and damn near threatening, actually. Shortly after the arrival of the 6 members, a yet unidentified Miami Beach park ranger arrived and told our members that they were prohibited from carrying openly at the park. Our members politely informed the ranger that he was incorrect, even offering him a printed copy of the law. The ranger refused to acknowledge the statute and instead called who we believe was a supervisor, who responded they did not know the law. The ranger decided to instead call Miami Beach Police, report our members, and leave the scene. Minutes later, a unit of Miami Beach police officers approached our members and were greeted. Instead of agreeing and engaging in a consensual inquiry, the officers completely ignored any semblance of reasonable suspicion, and at least 3 officers drew their service pistols and aimed them at our members who were committing no crime, were not acting in a rude, dangerous, or threatening manner, and who were simply fishing. At gunpoint, officers threw our members to the ground and in the process injured 2 of them. They then illegally confiscated the lawfully holstered firearms and were unlawfully detained without reasonable suspicion for over 90 minutes before being released from cuffs. Before the lawfully owned and carried firearms were returned, and after MBPD was aware that the members had committed no crime, all firearm serial numbers were illegally recorded, and our members were told to open their vehicle trunks in the view of MBPD officers. Officers had removed cartridges from magazines and themselves placed the firearms, magazines, and ammunition into the owner's vehicle. Owners were not permitted to open the vehicle compartment in lieu of the trunk, nor were they permitted to rearm until officers had concluded their interaction. Finally, the pier, which by then had been empty for 2 hours, remained closed at the order of the city of Miami Beach, confounding our members who wished to continue fishing. In a Miami Herald article on the incident, Miami Beach Police Chief Daniel Oates said, "Given the current climate, if 6 people show up to a pier in South Beach carrying guns, our citizens expect us to respond promptly and address any potential danger. We did so, and I'm confident that our officers acted appropriately. The actions of the Miami Beach Police Department and the subsequent comment by Chief Oates are unconscionable, unacceptable, and unconstitutional. Florida, Kerry, will see that the city of Miami Beach learns it cannot abuse the fundamental civil rights of Florida citizens." The crux of the matter here is that in Florida, open carry is not legal unless you are hunting, fishing, or camping, which these guys were were fishing. So they were completely legal in what they were doing, but the officers apparently either were unaware or unconcerned and didn't care that what the law actually said.
Well, let's don't say like the officers wasn't aware or don't care, but just remember they just had the school shooting, and then was 2 more shootings down there. So they're on high ends. So anytime they see a gun, they're going to react without in consideration of the law, you know.
Well, and I get the urge to do that, but the fact is, the law is the law. I mean, if these guys are just sitting there fishing, engaging in a lawful activity, there's no real need to approach the situation like that.
I mean, I'm totally in agreement with you, but let's look at it from the standpoint of if you go to McDonald's every day and you have a cup of coffee at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, you go in and you have good conversation with everyone. That first morning after so many days, somebody comes in and either tries to rob you in a physical manner without putting a gun to you, but putting their hands on you. Now, whenever you go back into an environment similar to that, you're going to be on guard a little bit extra, right? Even though...
Yeah. And I understand what you're saying about being on guard about it, but you still have to act in a particular professional manner. For instance, I work in juvenile corrections, and we had a group of youth come in from one of our less secure treatment programs a year or so ago. And they had tried to escape from that treatment program. And in the process, the 4 of them beat up and one of our staff members at that treatment program and ended up breaking his neck. When those 4 came to our detention facility in order to wait for their trial, we had to be on guard, at least as far as, okay, we know that these kids are capable of this violence. We know that they're capable of trying to escape and trying to attack staff and take their keys and et cetera. But we still had to approach them and interact with them in the same way we would everybody else, without preconception and without bias, regardless of what our personal feelings were. Yes, be on guard, but there's still a professional level of conduct to which you should hold yourself. And I think that the same thing applies here with with Florida law enforcement or any law enforcement for that matter.
Yeah, like I said, what you're saying is true, but the level of training that those officers had plays a part into it.
True.
The outcome of the daily conversations that go on with that police force, the leadership of that police force plays a part of it. And then too, the climate of the society of everybody who is affected and has a say-so in political or financial gain in that area as well.
Yeah.
I think I know exactly what you're saying is that, and I missed the first part of it, but if the police officers got a call to show up for somebody open carrying while they were fishing, I can almost assume that it's in a very country type area where there's like no other houses around. And if that's the case, it should have been to just show up and investigate and say, what's going on? Okay, cool.
That was on up here at Miami Beach.
Okay, so
it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't actually a rural area. It was a more urban area, but you know, to me it would be a question of, you know, getting the call and okay, well, what are they doing? They're fishing.
Yeah.
Are they waving their guns around? No. Are they threatening anybody? No. Are they brandishing or doing anything dangerous or making threats or doing anything? No. Okay.
I think what a police officer has to understand, and what they actually do understand, is that if somebody has a firearm in the holster, 99% of the time, if someone's going to commit a crime, they're going to be hiding that gun. It's not going to be just chilling on their holster. And second of all, I get what you were saying as far as they were, you know, if they're on edge on what happened and what's fresh in their mind. But like you said, they still have to represent the law in its fullest. Well, when you read the story, it sounds like what they did was they took the cartridges out of the gun, they took the magazines out, they put it in the car. They said that you weren't allowed to go in the car until we get done with our investigation. I get that. Police officers have to be safe. They have to assure that they're going to be able to go home tonight. I get that. But as far as misrepresenting the law as it reads is a different story. That should have been an open and close. Hey, you guys are, what are you doing here? What's your business here? You're fishing. Okay. Is it actually a law that you can actually wear your firearm open carry on the beach? If it is, then you're fine. If not, well, then there's the problem. You know what I mean? Like if it's not legal to wear your firearm on your hip while you're fishing, then yes, that's a problem.
Yeah, but if it is, then
but if it's actually
be a
legal,
problem.
but if it's actually legal to wear your firearm on the beach, it should not be a problem. It should be just a quick investigation. Police officers show up. Hey, what's your business? You're fishing. Cool. Just want to check. We had a call. All right, we'll see y'all later. Have a good day.
Now, out in the chat, Mike, you want to repeat what you said to Vanessa Kitty out in the chat? Because I think that is something that definitely has to be said, that anytime you do have an interaction with law enforcement, whether you're right, whether you're wrong, whether it's a gray area, you should do what you're telling her. If you want to go ahead and repeat that, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah. Only thing I just wrote to her, just said, just go ahead and comply with whatever the officer is saying. And then if they overstep their boundaries, now you have the right to complain. And if need be, ramp it up and then take it to court. Absolutely
right. One thing, you might beat the charge, but you are not going to beat the ride. Once they decide that X, Y, and Z is going to happen, then X, Y, and Z is going to happen, and they're going to do it. And that's that. You can sort this out later through the legal system, but smart money is don't resist. Don't ramp the situation up yourself, because it's generally not going to end well for you. Now, I'm not saying roll over and don't have any discussion about the issue, but certainly comply and don't resist. Ever.
Yeah, I totally agree with that one, because not only is that entry into that back seat going to be a little painful, but that paperwork after the fact is going to be a lot more expensive in the court with fines and lawyer fees and all that, because they're going to try to stick it to you. especially if you resist the officer in any type way.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, those of you who are regular listeners of the show know what's coming next, as I like to close things out on what I consider a high note. I'm going to go through some self-defense shout-outs. Now, those of you who aren't regular listeners of the show need to understand that when I go through these, I am not glorifying or reveling in the death of the bad guy. I am glorifying and reveling in the preserved and continued life of the good guy, and the fact that they had the method, means, and opportunity to defend themselves from the bad guy. Suspected carjacker shot and wounded at Colorado campground, from the Associated Press. Castle Rock, Colorado. Colorado police say a 29-year-old man who carjacked a vehicle and shot at other vehicles was himself shot when he threatened a camper at a campground in Pike National Forest. The Douglas County Sheriff's Office says the man was shot multiple times and taken to a hospital where he is in stable condition. The man's name hasn't been released. The first victim reported that they were traveling on Rampart Range Road when they were flagged down by a white male between 20 and 30 years old, standing next to a blue Mazda station wagon with a blown rear tire. The victim sped away, and when they say the suspect carrying a firearm. Well, that is a horribly written sentence. The suspect then re-entered his car and drove north on Rampart Range Road. While driving on Rampart Range Road, the suspect encountered two other victims who he menaced with a weapon. According to the second victim, the suspect shot in their direction. The third victim reported the suspect pulled the trigger on the firearm but did not discharge. The suspect continued driving the stolen vehicle and shooting at passing vehicles. He ultimately stopped near Devil's Head Campground and approached the camper with a rifle. The suspect pointed the rifle at the camper, and police say the camper returned fire. No one else was injured. Charges are pending. Thankfully, that guy didn't have an opportunity to turn that into a horrible rampage, and that's to me, it's a wonderful thing that someone was there who stopped it. This is one out of Jefferson County, Alabama. It's a piece from July 5th in Breitbart. Woman shoots estranged husband who allegedly tried to sexually assault her. A Jefferson County, Alabama man allegedly attempted to sexually assault his estranged wife on July 5th, but she stopped the reported attack by shooting him. WBRC reports that police received a 10 a.m. domestic violence call. They learned that 31-year-old Eric Austin allegedly broke into his estranged wife's home and tried to sexually assault her. She shot him, and he ran from the house, got into a vehicle, and fled the scene. The Associated Press reports that Austin's vehicle was stopped by deputies, and he was taken to a hospital for treatment. Jefferson County Chief Deputy Randy Christian says that Austin faced his charges of attempted rape and second-degree domestic violence. He's being kept under guard while in the hospital. Finally, the pièce de résistance of self-defense shout-outs today. Suspect tries to steal car with toddlers in back seat. Gets shot in head by mother. July 5th in Breitbart. A suspect allegedly tried to steal a car with two toddlers in the back seat on July 4th and ended up hospitalized with a gunshot wound to the head. WTSP reports that the mother was out of the car at a Shell station in south of Dallas, Texas, around 10 p.m. when the suspect allegedly jumped into the vehicle and began to take off. The mother jumped into the passenger seat and begged him not to take the car, but he refused to request. The mother then reached into the glove compartment, pulled out a handgun, and shot the suspect in the head. And here's the beautiful thing, is her quote. The mother said, "I'm not a killer, but I do believe in defending what's mine," she added. "I hope that woke him up." She also said, "I was just trying to," she was firing a warning shot, is another part of her story. Now, I don't know where you come from, but where I come from, a warning shot generally doesn't get aimed at someone's head. But she's like, "I'm not a killer, enough that I was just trying to warn him."
That's a Texas warning shot.
Yeah, Texas warning shot. That's it.
Man, it sounded like she was listening to some Tupac right there. No killer, but don't push it.
The suspect lost control of the car after being shot and crashed into a telephone pole and a wooden fence. The suspect was taken to the hospital where NBC DFW reports his injuries were listed as non-life threatening. The two toddlers were not injured. And a new segment that I want to start is just to remind everybody that the wonderful effects of gun control. Chicago murders year to date. 221 people shot and killed. 1,193 shot and wounded. Total shot, 1,414. Total homicides, 268. Information's from heyjackass.com. So that's Chicago so far this year.
What a hellhole.
Yes, absolutely right. So once again, I want to thank
I'm going
everybody
to build
for
a
coming
wall.
by. Everybody that is in the chat, in the on the side chat, thank you for being here. Those of you over on Gun Channels, which if you're not a member on Gun Channels, you probably should be. Go to www.gunchannels.com. It is free to join. It is the water cooler of the Second Amendment community on the internet. You will find someone there to talk with at just about all hours of the night with pretty much anything. And totally lost my train of thought. You find someone there to talk about just about anything with. Let me go ahead and go through the panel here. Mike, you have anything you want to plug? Any final thoughts? Anything you want to part with?
Oh yeah. First of all, let me say thank you for having me on tonight, and I'm looking forward to future invites. I really enjoyed myself with the discussion. It was challenging in a sense. To let everyone know, if you come to Columbia, South Carolina on the 21st of July, we're doing an event here called Aiming for the Truth with Kevin Dixie. Part of that event is we're raffling off a set of scopes. So we're only doing 110 tickets per scope, and you don't have to be present to win. So you get a Leopold Mark IV 8.5 by 25 by 50 millimeter long range scope, and a Bushnell Elite Tactical 1 to 6.5 variable optic. And the Leopold comes with the Kestrel for $50. The Bushnell is $30. If you're interested in getting a raffle ticket, go to www.m-wtactical.com. Go to the last tab that says raffle and purchase your option of the ticket you want to purchase. The second thing we're doing is, if you look up in the upper corner, you see a GoFundMe campaign link. That link, we're sponsoring 3 deputy sheriffs in the city of Columbia to get jiu-jitsu training for a year at no cost to them or the department through the funds of that GoFundMe link. Also, we want to start a summer youth camp purchasing 22 long rifle to teach children marksmanship, and to do a fundraiser gathering to get more people involved into the voting process of the community. So if you can spare a contributional donation, it will be appreciative. But most importantly, spread the word, and let's bring everybody together and show what we can do in the 2A community as a whole.
Outstanding. Everybody go ahead and check that out. Roll call, anything you want to plug?
Just go check out my channel on YouTube, Roll Call 219. I'm also on Instagram. Post some pretty cool pictures on Instagram. Also, I will be doing a giveaway for hitting 219 subscribers on the channel, but it's gonna be in about a week, because I've ordered some stuff and it's not gonna get here until next week. So stay tuned for that, and I'll throw a video out there next week in the middle of the week when I receive this stuff and start putting it all together. And then you'll get your notification on how to enter it. It's going to be a cool little swag pack, so stay tuned for that. Other than that, please go check out gunchannels.com. It's free to join. Please go check out guntube.org also. It's a great site for Second Amendment stuff with no restrictions, unlike what YouTube does. So please go check out those websites.
All right. Ryan, is there anything you want to leave us with, sir?
I just want to say thanks for having me. It's been a good conversation as always, and good conversation in chat. And go check out my channel, ZRUSOutdoors.com. And that's about it.
All right. As always, I'm going to say once again, thank you to everybody for stopping by and being part of the conversation with us. I really enjoy these Friday chats with the panel and with the people in the side chat. As always, you can find me at Budget Guns and Gear Reviews here on YouTube, Budget Guns and Gear on Instagram, Twitter, Gunstreamer, GunTube, I think Facebook, hit them all. My website is www.budgetgunsandgear.com. As always, I want to leave you guys with us saying, never, ever, ever stop letting your Congress critters and elected officials know what you think. Always tell them your opinions on the laws and such in the Second Amendment. It's real critical that we hold their feet to the fire so that the rest of us don't end up going the way of places like California and New Jersey, where they will set out protected classes above the rest of us and or require the impossible of us. So make sure that your lawmakers know what you think. Send a call, write, send telegrams, semaphore, heliograph, smoke signals, carrier pigeons, whatever you have to do to let them know what you think. Never, ever, ever give up the fight, and we'll see you again next week.